How do you follow up a great villain when your story continues without them? That's not always an easy thing to do. It can be a challenge to fill dastardly shoes if you had an incredible villain wearing them beforehand. Some stories succeed and find new threats that help at least fill the hole, while others struggle to find anything comparable. It shouldn't be about repeating the exact same conflict or the same threat. No, that never works out to try to replicate it. It should be about finding something that's still compelling, but in a different way, and still poses a significant and enthralling threat to the protagonist. And it's particularly a very, very tall order when you have to be the antagonist that comes after someone like Sosuke Aizen. I've said it over the course of like a dozen videos, but Aizen is truly an incredible villain that not only was great at pulling the rug out from under characters, but also out from under people like me, the readers and viewers. He was ridiculously smart, powerful, and brought an air of calm intimidation that eventually broke down to show the monster he really was beneath. He knew how to be intimidating and also continuously bring surprises as the story progressed. His selfish ideology went against so much of Ichigo's own views, and despite being inevitably defeated, Aizen proved himself to be a consistently effective villain, a phenomenal one. So yeah, it's one hell of a tough act to follow, and I'm sure it had to be a challenge for Kubo when he kept writing after Aizen was beaten and locked away. What new villain will Bleach have after that? Who can possibly come next? Well, I'm happy to say, after these chapters, I feel like we are on the right track with this new threat, who now has a name: Tsukishima. It's too early to tell if he's even close to Aizen's level overall as an antagonist, but he's definitely captured my curiosity and proven to be a fresh kind of problem for our heroes. We saw how casually Tsukishima attacked Uryu, and in the anime he was shown a bit more, stalking Ichigo and causing other problems, but this right here, showing up to speak with Orihime, is the first time we really get to see Tsukishima directly. And it didn't disappoint. First though, we got to meet his underling, and frankly, I love the dynamic when villains have that one dude that's very much like their main minion and helper, and when that one lackey is just very obviously beneath them, whether it's physically or mentally, or even in just their level of villainy. Relationships like that usually lend themselves to either really funny little moments, or it actually shows an interesting power structure and can shed light on aspects of the villain that we don't get to see otherwise. Maybe this henchman is the one person they actually care about. Maybe it's someone that they just have complete control over. Maybe it's the one person that believes in them. There's always good opportunities with these types of relationships between antagonists. At the very least, having a much less threatening crony just makes the villain look that much scarier standing beside them. In this case, Tsukishima's henchman is a young man named Mo Shishigawara, and he's this wannabe tough guy and competent punk that is sent after Orihime, and what happens next was hilarious. I loved him not being able to attack her because she's hot, like physically being assaulted by her beauty and unable to do anything. It was like Yamcha in early Dragon Ball, when he would fall apart whenever he saw Bulma. Just really funny stuff. I loved the panels of him just getting knocked down by her. I also loved how it showed Orihime's innocent sweetness at first, until the moment she heard that Mo had anything to do with Uryu's attack. Orihime is by her nature more of a pacifist and a protector, but I liked seeing her shift so seamlessly into defense mode after being so kind to him a moment beforehand. She doesn't want to fight, but she will protect herself if she has to once she sees that there's a real threat in front of her, especially if it's one that hurt one of her friends. But what I really liked was that Kubo seemed to use this incompetent henchman to help emphasize Tsukishima's threat when he arrived to personally take over. It made the sudden change of atmosphere even more apparent, especially when Mo wants to prove himself and finish what he started, but Tsukishima has already decided that he's taking over. You know, like there's no discussion. The reaction that Shishigawara has to Tsukishima's book slamming closed says all you need to know. That one little action has so much power. Considering we've only seen Tsukishima with an open book so far, at least as far as the manga is concerned. He was even still reading from it as Uryu was chasing him, for instance. Him closing that book to actually give his undivided attention is a great way to rattle us in a subtle way, especially seeing how it rattles his underling too. Someone that's supposed to be on his side and is very clearly devoted to him. Yeah, Kubo did a great job of making Tsukishima threatening from the start. We've had a small taste of what this guy can do with what he did to Uryu, but he's mostly a complete unknown. There's obviously an innate fear of that, of not knowing what exactly he's capable of or what he wants, and it's the sense of mystery that Tsukishima shares with this arc in general, making him fit right into this dangerous new world of intrigue and unknown factors. While Chad can sense something is wrong and he and Ichigo hurry to try to reach Orihime, she stands alone against the arc's villain, and she really stood her ground and was brave when he was being very, very intimidating. I also thought her empathy for Shishigawara was sweet, but definitely not surprising. She always seems to have a way of seeing the flicker of good in their enemies, even helping people that have harmed her. That's just kind of Orihime's way, and I like that she's consistently that way. And this big heroic scene from her, this powerful moment, is literally cut short though when Tsukishima appears behind her, and the moment he cuts into Orihime, that page scared the hell out of me because that really looked like a killing blow. And yes, I know we've seen some Bleach characters survive apparent killing blows before, sometimes multiple times, right Momo? But this, for some reason, really hit me in the moment. I think maybe because it's Orihime, and it's a character that we know so well and that I've grown to really like, or it's just the innate humanity with Orihime, where she just feels more vulnerable than a Soul Reaper, you know? Plus, she's the one that usually heals people. Who heals the healer when the healer gets viciously run through by a sword? I guess Unohana would, if Unohana were here, but she's not. And I wonder if Unohana was here, would Tsukishima turn around and run away? I wonder. But yeah, she's not here, and Orihime gets stabbed. And I think it was so effective to not show the immediate aftermath of what happened next, and instead only show her once Ichigo and Chad arrive, where they see that she's okay at the same time that we do. She's physically unharmed. So for a second there, I thought maybe some shenanigans were happening and that maybe Mo was like a shapeshifter or something, but that thought went away once we saw Orihime's actual thoughts. But the suddenness of this and the lack of showing us what happened immediately after the attack helps to reinforce the confusion of what comes next, when Orihime notices that there's no physical signs that she was cut, but she remembers it happening. And that's not the weirdest part. She covers up that she was attacked, making note that she'd tell Chad about it later, but is still trying to keep Ichigo out of all this. When she's pressed on it, when Chad is like, I sensed that someone else was here, who was that? She says that it was her friend. Now, at first I thought, oh, this is just her trying to hide what happened to her, but no. Given her thoughts that we see, Orihime legitimately believed that Tsukishima was her friend when she said that. She's even thinking like, I know he stabbed me, so why am I thinking of him as my friend? So that's weird, right? Very weird. Like, what the hell just happened, Orihime? Obviously that sword stab did something to her, and I'm gonna take a shot at what it was. I think Tsukishima's Fullbring blade can like warp emotions or warp like a connection someone has with something. It could kind of be a play on the attachment theme we've gotten so far in this arc with Fullbrings in general. If Orihime's suddenly thinking he's a friend, maybe it can change how someone thinks of you. I'm not sure, but given the Fullbring's name Book of the End, and he obviously seems to be really about his book, like the sword is even a bookmark after all, maybe this is like he's changing the role someone has in the story of life, where he can shift himself from an enemy to an ally, from an antagonist to a supportive side character, just a friend, literally changing the narrative in a way. He's rewriting the book of life, or of how life is perceived, of how how who you think are your friends, who you think are your enemies. That's my current theory. It wasn't like she didn't remember it happening to her at all. She knew exactly what happened, but still couldn't help but view this man as a friend. So he didn't like neuralize memory wipe her. No, I think he's changing how he's viewed, the role he has in another person's perspective. He could be tweaking someone's mind in a way that's much more direct than even Eisen's hypnosis, where it's not the senses of perception, but someone's direct thoughts, what they think about someone else. The notion of knowing that a sword cut through you, but not leaving any actual physical damage, but still knowing that it did something to you, is a scary thought on its own. Her thinking, what did he cut, is deeply unsettling on a number of levels. It feels invasive, a sword that reaches to something deeper than your body. Maybe it even cuts like a part of your soul. I don't know. Like maybe he connected part of her soul to his soul and that's why she views him as a friend. Maybe that's what the sword does. I don't know. It's interesting though, as I put on my detective hat here, we now have 2 attacks from Tsukishima that had very different results. In crime scene number 1, Uryu was left bloody and injured to the point that he had to be hospitalized, while at crime scene number 2, we saw Orihime be cut but see that no visible injuries were left behind. But now she views her attacker as a friend, so I wonder a few things from this. How does Uryu view Tsukishima now? Does he also think that the person that attacked him was a friend? He was being a little cagey about it at the hospital, so maybe, or because of the clear difference in how this attack went down and the aftermath of it, did Tsukishima not do the same thing to Uryu that he did to Orihime? If that's the case, why? Is it because Orihime is a potential Fullbringer, like we've been talking about, while Uryu is a Quincy? Maybe Tsukishima's sword works differently on fellow Fullbringers compared to others. I don't know, but we have 2 attacks and they ended in different results. I just wonder how different. Is Uryu's view of Tsukishima skewed now? That, my friends, is the real question. But one of the things I'm really vibing with in general is that Tsukishima has similar aesthetics to Shogo Makishima from Psycho Pass, who was the first season's antagonist of that show. They are both chill, lanky guys that love reading books, which to me is one of those things where they're so casually doing bad things while also kind of visually being shown as well-read, intelligent. It's an effective way of showing that the threat might not be about physical strength, and so far that definitely seems to be the case. Both of these characters clearly enjoy employing psychological warfare, getting into people's heads in one way or another. But Makishima is one of my favorite anime villains, so believe me, the comparison is a massive compliment to our new baddie. I'm just saying there's similarities that I'm vibing with. We also get a page or 2 of execution by themselves, and I really like seeing more of their personalities thriving. Yuriko is so dutiful and proper, while Ginjo's just getting drunk. It's great. And the Fullbring gang honestly reminds me of like groups from horror movies or slasher flicks, like things like that. They've all got distinct looks, their own gimmicks, and are capable in their own right, but maybe not quite capable enough for what we're dealing with. I'm thinking like the Dream Warriors from Elm Street, or the Galactic Marines from Aliens, things like that, where I can see these guys being picked off one by one. Maybe a few survive, but at least a couple will be fodder for a memorable death scene or 2. Or even like a massacre where Ichigo suddenly finds most of execution is dead. I could honestly see that too. It's great to see them just so casually hanging out without, any characters we know, but then Ichigo shows up knowing that something weird happened with Orihime. He doesn't buy her and Chad trying to hide it, and I'm glad he didn't. It helps to keep him as a very active protagonist. And that's when we get some more truth. Ginjo reveals that not only do they know Tsukishima, but he's a Fullbringer like them. And even more than that, he was also a part of execution. I suspected all of this a little while ago. It just seemed like the natural way to go with the antagonist for this story, so it wasn't surprising that he's a Fullbringer or that he was part of execution, but it was nice to have that confirmation. We've been introduced to Fullbringers, and now we've got to fight one. It just makes sense for this arc. But one thing I didn't really consider was that Tsukishima used to be the leader of execution, and it's through this revelation that we start to learn more about about the group's origins. They were formed by Tsukishima specifically to find a way to get rid of their powers and their shared trauma, when we know that they found a Soul Reaper to transfer those powers to. Apparently, once that Soul Reaper had taken a few of the Fullbring powers, Tsukishima changed his mind and killed not just that Soul Reaper, but the Fullbringers that gave them their power. But Ginjo also theorizes that it might not have been a matter of Tsukishima changing his mind, but actually something he'd always planned the whole time. But I'm so curious as to why he would have done this, and what it would have accomplished. Why trick a Soul Reaper into taking some Fullbrings only to kill them, and the now normal people that transferred their abilities away? There had to be a reason, whether if maybe I'm right that Tsukishima's sword might have taken a part of Orihime's soul, maybe his sword can take power, can take Fullbrings, can take Soul Reaper, I don't know. Maybe he absorbed the powers when he killed that Soul Reaper? I just hope we actually get to see what transpired there, because I want to see how the surviving execution members got out of that. I assume that because they still had their abilities and hadn't given them to the dead Soul Reaper, they were able to fend Tsukishima off. Maybe that's where the scar on his face came from. Why didn't he wait until all of their abilities were transferred too? There's just a lot of questions, and I'm hoping we're going to get a flashback at some point that shows how all that went down. I've mentioned Ginjo secretly having a Soul Reaper badge for the past few videos, wondering why he has one, considering it was one of the first things we ever knew about him. I've considered heavily that he might have once been a substitute Soul Reaper himself, since he had that badge. But when Ginjo finally shows that substitute Soul Reaper badge again, I finally got my answer. This whole time I was pondering if it was Ginjo's, but evidently it was the dead Soul Reaper's badge, and he's just holding on to it since, you know, that guy's dead. It would have been interesting if he was a Soul Reaper, or if Isshin had that badge. If there was, I thought there was more to the Ginjo-Isshin connection that maybe was about the badge, but this works well too. It's the badge of the guy that died. I did take note of how different Ginjo and Tsukishima seem personality-wise, and I wonder how their leadership of execution differed outside of, Tsukishima killing his own teammates. From what we've seen in the group so far, Ginjo's pretty chill, maybe even a little too chill, and doesn't even seem to run an overly tight ship. He also doesn't seem like the kind of guy that reads a lot of books. Ginjo feels a bit more like a jock, while Tsukishima is like doing a book club or poetry slams. As far as what we've seen of the villain's leadership, which we only have how he treats Mo, he inspires a lot of loyalty, but also a lot of fear. So I wonder if that was what he was like when he led Execution 2. Were they all worshiping him in the way that Mo does? Was Execution more of like a cult with all these people with all these abilities, and Tsukishima saying that he knows how to fix them, follow me, I don't know. All in all, these chapters and episodes really served as a great introduction for this new enemy. Tsukishima is someone with a history, unexplored relationships, a quiet and calm menace about him, and what seems like a very scary ability, so he's got some great ingredients to be a fantastic antagonist moving forward, so I'm very hopeful. And there's also something mysterious going on with Urahara and Isshin. Naturally, with the way things are right now, Ichigo's pretty suspicious of them. Personally, I think they're probably doing something beneficial, and he's just being a bit paranoid because of everything happening. But this arc has kind of gone out of its way to make Ichigo feel like he's kind of on this island with the Fullbringers, but I just can't see Isshin actually doing anything that would be malicious toward his son. Deciding that none of his suspicions really matter while he's too powerless to really do anything about it, Ichigo is more determined than ever to get his power back. He even puts in a leave of absence at work, which really solidified that he's all in, and he's gonna stop trying to live this normal life like he was doing at the start of the arc. Hopefully, Ichigo's continued training with his Fullbring will help him be able to stand up to Tsukishima. Time will tell. I just want to know what the hell's going on with what happened with Orihime. And why she considers Tsukishima a friend. We're gonna stop there. That ended the volume, which means that I have officially read 50 volumes of Bleach. That's kind of crazy to think about, but considering I've also done over 50 videos covering my thoughts on my read-through, we really have come a long way, and it seems like there's still plenty more to see, including whatever Tsukishima has planned. It's gonna be interesting. So, as always, Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel a little bit extra, please become a member. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll see you all soon as we continue my read-through of Bleach. Bleach.